And this was an aha moment that I had in looking at the records before trial, and one that he had on the stand. And so, and I was setting him up for this the whole time, because I realized some point in time during direct that he just had no idea.
Right.
Because he's going with the story that's on the forensic analysis, not on what's in the phone records from the phone company. So we set that up, and I kind of make him take the bait a little bit, and we get to that sort of dramatic moment where I go up to the stand and show him the two separate records. And I think his response was,
brought to you by Defense Forensic, where we find the truth in data.
Welcome to our podcast, Digital Forensic Redefined. I'm Rob Walensky. I'll be the host, and I have a guest, Kevin Croninger, Monroe County, Wisconsin District Attorney. Kevin, you want to say anything before we begin?
I always have lots to say. Is there anything specific you want me to talk about? Or?
Let me rephrase that question, because asking a lawyer if he has anything to say is
how many hours you got?
Yeah, straight off a bad question. So we'll rephrase that. But you've participated before, and we talked a little bit historically about digital forensic experts or experts in general. So you know a little bit about, that aspect. We've covered that. I'd like to talk about this time a little more of the use of digital forensics in your work, in your profession. Maybe we can talk about some of the pitfalls, some of the issues that come up related to forensics or experts in general. And maybe talk about a few different situations, different cases where it's been either important or something went good or something maybe didn't go so good. So,
I can start with maybe an example of a case, if that makes. And one thing I always think about with digital forensics is, for a long time, when I first started prosecuting, there wasn't as much availability. I mean, in 2010, smartphones weren't as prevalent. I don't remember exactly when the iPhone became as, I guess, sophisticated as it is. But over time, I think we've seen a definite progression, obviously. And when I started, there wasn't a lot of like aha moments or these, I guess what you'd call a Matlock or Perry Mason moment in court.
Sure.
I think digital forensics opens up to that possibility, especially if one side isn't as prepared as the other side. So if you have one side that's done the digital forensic work, that's, reviewed the phone, looked through all the aspects of the phone, and the other side has just either gotten that in discovery and hasn't paid attention to it, you can have those moments in court where it's like all of a sudden the whole case for one side is essentially over because they weren't prepared for what came from the digital forensics.
Sure, and that brings up some memories of some situations that actually happened where you've provided them, as the state, you've provided the discovery, the information to the opposing side, but they may not have reviewed it or had somebody review it, and all of a sudden there's a list of text messages or something like that they've had the whole time that would have maybe resolved the case or changed it.
Yeah, and I can think of one specific example that I think you analyzed the phone for us. And I would say too is there's no point in getting these things done, having a forensic analyst done, if you're not going to actually look at what the person produces, right? I mean, that's basic common sense, but it amazes me how many times I see that. A defense attorney will just throw a report on my desk and they clearly haven't read it. Or we get to court, like this case I can talk about, and it's clear that the defendant and his attorney never read what was within both your forensic analysis and then the records we got from the phone company. So the case that comes to mind is a robbery case. A defendant who had committed some other robberies, had been to prison, got out of prison, and committed a robbery pretty quickly after being released from prison. We had some pretty good evidence on him. And I think we could have said we don't need to look at his phone because we have a lot of other good evidence. We had some DNA. We had some grainy surveillance footage. I mean, just a lot of decent stuff. But I think you and I talked and we thought, well, we want to be thorough. We want to make sure we do everything. And so we analyzed his phone, or you analyzed his phone when I asked you to, I think. Or maybe you did it beforehand. I don't remember. But because you're always good at pushing me to make sure I get everything I should.
I'm guessing it was my idea because it was a good one.
Maybe. Well, good ideas are great. It's the implementation that matters, and that was my role.
Yeah.
So we have a 4-day trial with this defendant, and he testifies on the 3rd day of trial. And the case is going pretty well for us, but this is he's a relatively smooth talking defendant, a guy who I think could endear himself to jurors. And I don't know that he scored that many points on direct examination. But on cross, his case essentially fell apart. He apparently didn't realize that in addition to your forensic analysis, we had also gotten text message records from the phone company.
Right.
And this was an aha moment that I had in looking at the records before trial, and one that he had on the stand. And I was setting him up for this the whole time, because I realized some point in time during direct that he just had no idea.
Right.
Because he's going with the story that's on the forensic analysis, not on what's in the phone records from the phone company. So we set that up, and I kind of make him take the bait a little bit, and we get to that sort of dramatic moment where I go up to the stand and show him the 2 separate records. And I think his response was literally, "Oh shit." Which, as a prosecutor, as an attorney, those are moments that as a prosecutor, no moment's happy, right? Because we've had a significant crime, somebody's been victimized. It's not happy, but it's, I guess, gratifying to know that you did the work you were supposed to do, that you followed through in the way you're supposed to follow through, and that work paid off. It wasn't
kind of that obvious tipping point where you kind of know now you're in the driver's seat. I think we have that as investigators, or sometimes too you find that right thing or have that right event.
Yeah, and know that it's worthwhile, right? Because there's a lot of times, and I think this is true for prosecutors or defense attorneys, you're like, man, this is a lot of work, and what are we getting at, right? Like, is it worth it to have this phone analyzed? Is it worth it to have this car analyzed? And the answer is you don't know what you don't know, right? And there may be some information in that phone, in that car, in that computer that makes if you're a defense attorney, makes your client not guilty. And if you're a prosecutor, there might be information in there that is like, why are we even having a trial? This is obvious, right? I mean, literally in this case, there was text messages about, let's go rob this establishment. Right. And then he tried to claim he didn't send them, and the next text message was him sending a picture of his penis to his girlfriend. And so, things that are, that's a pretty an easy way to identify someone.
Nobody's gonna buy that he didn't send the message 15 seconds before the penis picture. They didn't just exchange the phone to send the message and then take the picture. So
and so I think in this era, and I think all of us are still learning a little bit. I mean, I'll be the first person to admit that I feel like pretty much every month there's some new app, something with phones. We can get into certain phones, we can't get into other phones. Even car forensics is something that is pretty new to me that I didn't realize sort of the capabilities of what's there. So I think we all need to, as professionals in the field, whether you're a cop, whether you're a defense attorney, if you care about this stuff at all, you should have some base knowledge and then reach out to people who have an expertise in that to help you with that, so you can be prepared and get the appropriate result, whether that's an acquittal or a conviction, depending on what side you're on.
Right. So, in the years where we worked together exclusively, we did a lot of major crime stuff, a lot of drugs. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the use of mostly phone technology and stuff in our drug prosecutions and our drug cases.
Yeah. I think the phone a lot of times is the most important evidence. You and I have convicted people of delivery of controlled substances without ever recovering any substances. A lot of times that's done with a phone, right? You need other witnesses. I'm not saying just go take someone's phone and then you can convict them, or, acquit them, or that you should, if you're a defense attorney, plead out someone just because we have their phone. You got to look at the actual facts, right? Sure. But there's been many cases over the years that you and I have worked that the phone is kind of like you said, the tipping point, right? Like, we have a pretty good case, but now with these text messages, with whatever else we get off of the phone, pictures a lot of times are really important. Right. From the state side, and I think probably from the defense too, it kind of gives you an insight into what other social media apps they're using, and those can be gold mines. There's just so much information on someone's phone that's potentially usable. You got to be careful about how you procure it, obviously, and do it in a legal and lawful and constitutional way. But it's really important. And I think on drug cases, particularly important. I can think of a couple different examples where in Wisconsin we have laws that are make it more serious if you're possessing with intent. And so to be able to show that someone is possessing a substance with the intent to deliver it, a lot of times the best way to prove that is their messages, right? It's their own words.
Right. Well, and a lot of times with the possession with intent, it's a little bit subjective. There's not a definitive way in the law to necessarily prove it. Obviously if somebody's got 50 pounds of cocaine, it probably isn't personal use.
Yep.
But
what if they have 10 grams? What if they have 15, 20?
Right.
Now you're starting to get into stuff where, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I could go buy a few grams of cocaine or something. Any amount, an 8-ball, could be personal use, or I might be dropping it off on the corner on my way to work that night for somebody.
And what if you're the biggest drug dealer in the area and we just happen to only catch you with,
right.
If we can get into your phone and see that 3 grams might be all we need to show something else, right? So
yeah, so a lot of times, and then you find the text message thread that says, after work, I'm going to swing by your house and drop off this 8-ball. It tends to add some credibility to your possession with intent charge versus a simple possession charge.
Yeah, and I think, just if nothing else, too, just knowing who's talking to who, I think is really important. It's frankly, and I don't think this is any secret, an investigative technique that we use sometimes too, is just asking for consent searches for people who've been arrested, who maybe are somewhat cooperative. Hey, can we just look at your phone so we get an idea of who the players are? If you're a drug investigator and you don't know who the players are in your area, you're not doing your job.
Right.
And
the phones is huge for that. Like I said, that's obviously not a secret. In more modern times, a lot of times what'll happen is when we're going to arrest these people, they'll be snapping cell phones in half versus throwing the dope out the window, or they'll leave the legal gun sit there, but they'll be snapping that phone because they don't want you knowing who they're dealing with or who their sources are, and they don't want to,
or doing a hard reset, and we see that too, trying to
factory reset a phone.
Yeah. So
that sounds crazy to somebody from the outside, because most of us, I think, we want to get rid of the dope. We don't want the cops to see us with the dope. Well, these guys are okay getting caught with a little dope, but they don't want the cops seeing the phone. So,
really, for most people, most of their life, and I think we talked about the Amish before, unless you're Amish, most of your life is on your phone in some way, right? Pictures of important events, text messages. There's a lot of personal content on your phone, right? There's lots of stuff on everyone's phone, I think, that they don't want read out loud on this podcast, for instance.
Right.
And that's whether you're law-abiding or not, I think. So,
yeah, you've just, on the way here today, we stop at the local 7-Eleven, and
the Coca-Cola Slurpee is very good. But we don't have 7-Elevens by us now, but that's pretty good. I like that. Not advertising for anyone, but just to be clear, I like that. So
I set my phone down in my dashboard, and I actually texted somebody in relation to what we're doing here today, and I set my phone down, and I bought a bag of chips and a soda or whatever, and we go to leave, and I'm in panic mode because I can't find my cell phone. I literally went and opened a trash can that I threw something in outside the building. I went inside. I talked to the manager. We went everywhere I went to buy anything, and I couldn't find this phone, and come to find out it's sitting on my dashboard, and I'm literally in panic mode.
Who found your phone?
I think you might have assisted with that.
Yeah. Just for the record, and that's good we're recording, so
we're calling it, and it's ringing. It's ringing in my car, so it's got to be nearby, right? Well, it was literally a foot away from the thing. It was Bluetooth too. Yeah. So, you made an interesting comment before. I think your words were, "You don't know what you don't know." So, how do you determine that you need to know something you don't know? Like you said, people collect, say, phones. The police may have them in evidence, or the attorney may have them preserved, to represent their client or whatever. How do you know when it's time to look at these phones or not look at these phones, or how do you make a determination? Because there may be something in there that's exculpatory. There may be something in there that's detrimental to a defendant. I mean, how are these decisions made?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is kind of, I guess it goes a little bit off topic, but is being humble enough to understand that you don't know everything, right? And that whether you're a cop, a defense attorney, or a prosecutor, that the other side probably there's some reason we're set for trial, right? Why are we set for trial? Why are we going to trial? If you're a defense attorney, why aren't they just giving me some sweetheart of a deal? Their case must be decent. If you're a cop, why is this defendant setting it for trial? Well, maybe because they know something I don't. And so never being so pigeonholed that you think I just know everything and this guy's going down on this. I think as far as making the decision, some of it's just having discussions with the relevant people, right? So if you're a defense attorney, with your client, if you're the state, having those discussions with officers, and your investigators, the chief investigator in the case better know the case better than you, especially as you're before trial. Maybe at trial I should know it better, but even then I tell them, you're the expert. You're going to sit right here next to me. I've had you sit next to me at many trials. And when I screw up something or if I say something wrong, you're going to correct me. And if you don't, we're going to have problems. And so I think having those conversations with those people and knowing, okay, what was, name the suspect. What was he doing? Did he use his phone? What did he use it for? What apps did he use? All of these questions that kind of give us insight. Where did he drive? What kind of car does he have? Where would he use that to go drop off the dope? Maybe we can analyze his car and watch him go to the same place, drop off dope all the time. Those are the kind of questions. I mean, some of that is just what I would call old school police work stuff that, obviously you can't analyze a car 50 years ago, but you could ask all these questions. And so it's not a substitute for doing a good job, but it's just a tremendous aid in finding the truth, which is what in the criminal justice system we should all be looking for.
Right. Well, and one of the big things just out of that is, police may get bad information, rely on maybe something they shouldn't have or whatever, but the information in these devices and phones or whatever, it kind of is what it is. I mean, there's still some factors involved, determining accuracy and
yeah. And I think one cautionary tale I tell people is don't just get like have somebody do a dump, not analyze it for you, and then just be like, this is great. I have this great evidence without understanding it. Because I've seen that from defense attorneys too. I'm like, well, you don't understand what that means. And then I'll call Rob, and Rob will tell me like, yeah, it means what you think, Kevin, and not what they think. And basically they're an idiot. And they're not an idiot, but it just, they jumped to the conclusion too quickly. So,
right. Well, and sometimes that's real easy. I mean, sometimes it looks pretty black and white, and there might be GPS coordinates with something, that we've obtained, and the where those GPS coordinates are actually relevant aren't necessarily say where a photo was taken, but where it was when they texted the photo. Yep. I mean, so these are things you got to know, and this isn't common knowledge. I mean, this is a very specific area of expertise. I mean, you can't possibly know some of this without doing it.
And I think it goes back to something we talked about maybe on a different time we were talking, but is you have to have someone who can explain to you those limitations, right? An expert who knows like, okay, that timestamp on that picture or that location stamp or whatever it's called, I don't even know the right name of it because I'm not an expert in it, but that could be when it was texted, not when it was taken. That could be when they opened it up on their phone. I mean, depending on what the situation is and what the app is, I mean, there's just so many different variables, and you have to have someone who at least can either knows what the limitations are or will say to you if they're your expert, I don't know that, but I can find someone who does.
Right. Any other challenges or issues that you have or seen with digital evidence, forensic evidence?
I mean, I think the main thing I would say is just use common sense when you're using it, right? Like it's a tremendous tool, but it's like any really important tool, right? People can do stupid things with it. When the car was first invented, it was great, and people did a lot of stupid things with it. It's true with anything else. Don't be an idiot. Right. Use it appropriately, use it responsibly, but don't ignore it. Remember it's there, and if you're an attorney, you have an obligation to whoever your client is, whether that's the state, whether that's your a defendant, or if you're in the civil realm, a plaintiff or defendant in the civil realm, you have an obligation to them to do what you can do. And in this day and age, if you're not considering digital forensics, you're not fulfilling that obligation.
Any final thoughts on what we discussed here today?
No, other than you owe me a Slurpee.
Any other words of wisdom?
I don't have many of those.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for joining our podcast this week, brought to you by Defense Forensic, where we find the truth in data.
And before you go, please make sure to click that subscribe button and post any comments you may have about this week's episode below. Also, check out our website at defenseforensic.com for more information on the services available for individuals and organizations that require expert analysis of digital evidence.
And once again, thanks for watching, and join us next week for a new episode. And remember, the truth is out there.